Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sylvia Parham, and I'm the Grants Coordinator for Cook County's Department of Planning and Development. Under the Office of the President, Cook County's Bureau of Economic Development and Department of Planning and Development welcome everyone to the Community Development Block Grant Program Year 2022 application webinar. I hope everybody's staying safe and warm and healthy. I know it's extremely cold out today, but I thank you all for taking time out of your day to come and sit with us through this presentation. I would like to take a moment to introduce the Department of Planning and Development Community Development team. If you are here and you are present when I call your name, if your camera is not showing, just do a little quick peek and let everybody see who you are. I'm going to begin with Cheryl Cook. You can probably wave your hand, Cheryl. She's our new Deputy Director for Community Development. Prior to coming to Cook County, she previously worked in corporate, nonprofit, and government. We are excited to have her here on our team, and we will look forward to having a successful program year this year with her being the new team lead. Thank you, Cheryl. Next, I would like to introduce our capital team, and we're going to start with May Wilson. May Wilson, if you're here, can you just pop your screen on for a moment? She's the Executive Assistant for Susan Campbell, and she's also our Project Director for DPD. She assists us with all of our capital projects, and without her, I don't know if we would be successful at all. Hi, May. Next, I have Lisa Carey. She's our Administrative Analyst, and she's also with our capital team. She joined us probably about 2 years ago, and she hopped in and just started working the capital projects, and I think she's pretty much one of the top performers right now. Every year, she starts her projects and make sure that we get them going, and she's the first one to draw down. And the next person we have is Tim Kleiss. He's our project manager. He's a person that has been with the county for quite some time. He has a thorough history of capital improvement projects, and he knows many of our municipalities. He assists us with environmental reviews and anything that we need help on. Next, we have other support members. I don't know if they're here, but we have Sonia Brown. She's our administrative assistant. If you're here, Sonia, pop your camera on. She assists us with all of the agreements, all of the applications, putting together all of the information that we need to forward over to you guys. Without her help, you guys would not probably most likely get your checks when you get them, because she makes sure she have all of those checks processed and all of the funding going out. And then also we have David Washington. I don't know if he's here, but he's our compliance specialist, and he works on our environmental reviews to make sure that we have everything that we need to get those applications or those agreements executed once the applications are awarded. And then last but not least, we have our public service team, starting with Erica Branch. She's our administrative analyst, and she oversees a majority of all of the public service projects, our social service projects. And her team consists of Elizabeth Gilbert. She's a planner. If you're here, Elizabeth, pop your camera on right quick. Hi, Elizabeth. And then also Pam White. She's also one of our planners. They are our historians. They have been with the county for so long, and they have a thorough knowledge of all of the projects as it relates to public services, ESG with Erica, and we are pleased to have them as a part of our team. So as we get started with the presentation, before we get started, I just want to give you a little bit of background. Today, we will begin going over the application applicants and provide information regarding what is required for a successful application. Keep in mind, the application process is extremely competitive, and just to give you a little bit of background, on an annual basis, we receive approximately $10.7 million of HUD funds to provide services to 134 municipalities and approximately 50 to 100 nonprofit agencies. These funds cover 20% of administrative costs and planning, 15% of public service, and that's for our social service projects, and the remaining goes towards the capital improvement projects, which is approximately 65%. In program year 2021, we received 90 applications, which totaled approximately $24 million in requests for capital projects only. The available amount of funds was a little north of 6.8 million that we received from HUD. And we were only able to award 32 projects. So as you complete your applications today, keep in mind those numbers, because if we're getting in over $24 million worth of requests and we only have a little bit north of $6.8 million to fund, your application is being vetted thoroughly, and we want to make sure that it's a good project. And I'll go over the details in terms of what makes a good project as we get through the presentation. Next slide.
My computer's being a little bit laggy, so my apologies there.
No problem. Well, while he's trying to get to the next slide, as we move into the presentation, please feel free to put any comments in the chat, and we'll respond at the end of the presentation. So if you have questions, just make sure you just put that information into the chat. Next slide. So we're going to start with giving you a little bit of background regarding the CDBG program. And for those of you who are new, and those that are returning, the ones that are returning may already know or have all of this information, but those of you who are new, you may not have the information. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. The United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, known as HUD, CDBG program provides annual grants on a formula basis to entitlement cities and counties to develop viable urban communities by providing decent housing, a suitable living environment, and by expanding economic the Housing and Community Act of 1974 as amended. And the nature of the program is HUD awards grants to entitlement communities, grantees to carry out a wide range of community development activities directed towards revitalizing neighborhoods, economic development, and providing improved community facilities and services. The awards are issued to qualifying applicants and administered to Cook County's Bureau of Economic Development, Department of Planning and Development. Entitlement communities develop their own programs and funding priorities. However, Cook County, as the grantee, must give maximum feasible priority to activities which benefit low and moderate income persons. Also, as the grantee, we must carry out activities which aid in preventing or the prevention of or elimination of slum and blight. Additionally, grantees may find activities when the grantee certifies that the activities meet the community development needs, having a particular urgency because existing conditions pose a serious and immediate threat to the health and welfare of the community where other financial resources are not available to meet such needs. CDBG funds may not be used for activities which do not meet these broad national objectives. Next slide. So, as we get into the content of this presentation, I will be going over the national objectives, the program requirements, the threshold requirements, as well as the project priorities for capital, eligible projects, prohibited projects, economic development criteria, demolition criteria, and then I'll give you details about the application evaluation, the 2022 CDBG application highlights, along with any and timelines, and then briefly go through a review of the application. Next slide. Now, as you prepare your application, keep in mind that you must pay attention to the national objectives. Application cannot be accepted. There are three primary objectives that you must focus on, and the first one is the primary objective, which benefits low and moderate income persons. 70% of CDBG funds must be used to benefit low and moderate income persons. There are 4 categories listed under the primary objective, and they are area benefit, which is the low mod area, limited clientele, which is the limited clientele, and then you have low mod housing and low mod income. And under low mod income, we're focusing on job creation and retention. The second objective is to aid in prevention and elimination of slum or blight. We have 3 categories there, which focuses on area basis and spot basis. On area basis, we look at preventing and eliminating slum or blight. On spot basis, we look at eliminating specific conditions or blight or physical decay. And then the third one is our urban renewal area. This will be a focus on the development of viable urban communities, principally for low and moderate income persons. And the 3 categories that we look at under that particular category would be decent housing, suitable living environment, and to expand economic opportunities. And then we have our third objective, which is to meet a need having a particular urgency. Those projects basically are our demolition projects. And in order to qualify for a demolition project, you must focus on having an urgent need, and the urgent need activities must pose a serious or immediate threat to the health or the welfare of the community. Also, the existing conditions must be recently urgent, meaning that the occurrence must have had taken place within 18 months of the request. So if it has taken place outside of the 18 months, it will not be qualifying under this particular objective. And then the third one is the grantee is unable to finance the activity and other sources of funding are not available. Next slide. So the next section is the program requirements. We have several program requirements here. The first one is the eligible area. And keep in mind as we go through the slide presentation, the first sure that when you submit a project, that it is complying with those 2 areas. So the eligible areas are all jurisdictions in Cook County that may be served by the CDBG program. We have quite a few. I mentioned earlier the 134 municipalities, but we do have some exceptions. And those exceptions fall in the area of City of Chicago, Evanston, Skokie, Arlington Heights, and Des Plaines. There's more listed in the guide, and the guide is also going to be online, and that the areas that shows the additional non-qualifying jurisdictions are found on page 4. We also have eligible projects, which are the infrastructure projects, public facility, demolition, and these are our normal requests for capital projects. These are the requests that we get in on an annual basis. We also have special economic development, social services, and micro enterprise. Though micro enterprises are requested under our economic development window. Next slide. Can you go back for me? I have one more thing to mention about the administrative requirements. I want to make sure I make that point. Sorry about that. Under the administrative requirements, this is critical because if your project is awarded, these administrative requirements will be applicable. We would have to go through an environmental review, the procurement process, Davis-Bacon and labor standards guidelines. You want to make sure that the project has completed the Fair Housing Act survey, and we look at the lead-based paint as well as the relocation and acquisition. These projects must be also consistent with our Cook County's consolidated plan and moving to implementation. HUD community planning development requires proof of low and moderate income data. So with that proof, you'd have to look at the 2011 and 2015 ACS, which is provided to us by HUD. And this is our census tract and block group low mod income percentages tracking form. That information will be made available online, and the link will be provided as you pull up the application. If you have any questions regarding getting to that link, you can reach out to us. Next slide. Now we're going to get into the threshold requirements for capital improvement projects only. We have two areas here that we want to focus on, and those areas would be the area benefit. We recently stopped doing an exception. The exception consisted of having a 49% opposed to the 51%, and the 49% was basically focusing on water, sewer, or flood control projects. But now we no longer have that exception, so you must be sure to know that your area benefit at 51% will include infrastructure, water, sewer, as well as the flood control. Your application for your project also would be responsible for making sure that you're just at the cap for both municipalities and nonprofit. We ask you over and again not to submit an application over $400,000 for municipal and not over $200,000 for nonprofit. It's difficult for us to make a decision when we have projects coming in the amounts over the cap. Also, you must only submit one application per capital project, so we will not be reviewing multiple applications. You must only submit one. Next page. Now we have a list of capital improvement priority projects, and those priority projects fall in the category of infrastructure, public facility, economic development, and demolition. We want to make sure such as projects that may be funded with CDBG and Invest and Cook. You looked at the Invest and Cook application earlier today, and now you're looking at the CDBG. So any projects that you can have that will leverage against other projects such as the Invest and Cook will be looked upon favorably. We also want you to coordinate multiple infrastructure improvements into a single project. And an example of that would consist of combining like a sidewalk project with water main projects and street resurfacing, as well as alley resurfacing. So if you have a project that you can do multiple things with, that would be considered a favorable project as well. We would like for you to continue to support capital improvement for public facility projects, and then also target infrastructure projects and programs that will be a promotion for the economic development efforts. We look at prioritizing projects and programs that help to address the job housing disconnect, and particularly within the South suburban areas. And coordinate closely with other infrastructure resources. Again, that would be such projects or programs such as Invest and Cook. Next slide. Now I'm going to just get in a little bit with regards to the eligible activities. And activities is a term that's used by HUD. Projects is a term that's being used by Cook County. Under the eligible projects, the eligible grantees are as follows. They are principal cities of metropolitan statistical areas, which is the MSAs. They have other metropolitan cities and populations of at least 50,000, and they qualified urban counties with populations of at least 200,000. These cities are entitled to receive their own annual grant. And that was pretty much like the cities that I mentioned earlier, the city of Chicago, Evanston, Skokie. They would be entitled to their own CDBG grant. HUD determines the amount of each entitlement grantee by a statutory dual formula, which uses several objective measures of community needs, including the extent of poverty, population, housing overcrowding, aging of housing, and population growth lag in relationship to other metropolitan areas. An eligible activity would be funded by CDBG would include constructions of public facility and improvements, such as the water and sewer facility and street neighborhood centers, and the conversion of school buildings for eligible purposes, public service within certain limits, with the focus on an overall infrastructure capital as an eligible activity would be rehabilitation of residential and non-residential structures, provisions of assistance of nonprofit motivating businesses to carry out economic development and job creation and retention activities. We look at relocation and demolition, and then acquisition of real properties. And last but not least, we look at activities related to energy conservation and renewable energy resources. I'll talk a little bit about a project that we're working on right now that may fall in that category. Next slide. Now, this is a list of types of projects that we funded in the past. We have several examples that are here on the screen. And as I mentioned in the earlier slide, we're looking under infrastructure to improve and construction and install streets, curbs, and water, sewer lines. And those types of projects fall under the street improvements, alley improvements, sidewalk replacement, sanitary sewer, and water system repairs. The street lighting is also one of the qualifying areas. And this year we had a major focus. We collaborated with an agency by the name of Elevate Energy, and we awarded them $400,000 to install LED lightings in the city of Harvey. The city of Harvey is one of our distressed communities that are in need of a lot of resources from CDBG. So therefore, we're hoping that the lighting project will help eliminate some of the issues that they have as it relates to violence or crime that's in the city, and also make sure that the city is lit and well serviced. The next category is the public facilities and nonprofit facilities. These improvements include, but not limited to, recreational facilities, parks, playgrounds, and facilities from persons with special needs. An example of an eligible cost include energy efficiency improvements and disabled accessibility improvements. Again, we look at energy efficient roof, HVAC repairs, sewer line replacement, kitchen and bath renovations for senior centers, as well as for facilities with persons with disabilities. Under our economic development activities, we are looking at, they are subject to the required public benefits standards being met through job creation and retention, or the provisions of goods and services. Note that the ED activities will restrict or are restricted to projects undertaken and controlled by public and nonprofit entities. These would be acquiring, constructing, reconstructing, rehabilitating, or installing commercial or industrial buildings, structures, and other eligible real property improvements in connection with otherwise eligible CDBG economic development activities. These services will be restricted to such services provided by nonprofit entities. And then our last category is the demolition. CDBG annual demolition funding requests must not exceed $20,000 per parcel. CDBG funding requests under $20,000 per parcel are accepted on a rolling basis throughout the year, and we will be subject to eligibility and available funding. In either case, the proposed demolition project must qualify on the basis of CDBG slum, blight area, spot, or under urgent need. We look at single-family structures, multi-unit residential buildings. Other structures must be reviewed to determine eligibility. And again, just keep in mind for your demolition projects, these projects are looked at and reviewed on a rolling basis depending on available resources or funding that we have. So if you choose not to do an application for demo projects with this application, you can still contact our office and we'll give you information with regards to submitting one throughout the year. Next slide. Now we'll look at our non-eligible activities. Excuse me. The following may not be assisted with CDBG funds, and those are the buildings or portions thereof used for the general conduct of government. So any project that you have that you may be considering, such as a project to do repairs to a municipality or anything that's conducting business with government, is not an eligible project. Also, general government expenses or any political ties are not eligible projects. Now, the following generally may not be assisted with CDBG funds, and that's such as the purchasing equipment, new housing construction, operating maintenance expenses, or income payments. An example of a project that may qualify under here, under purchase of equipment, would be something that's stabilized. If you are doing a repair in a nonprofit agency's facility, or you need to install equipment such as refrigerators or something that's going to be stationary to that facility, that may qualify depending on the information that's provided in the application. As for new construction or new housing construction, that would probably most likely fall under a renovation. That's only if the footprint of the structure is still remaining and you're building the renovation around the footprint of the original structure. Next slide. Now, there are several examples of the economic development criteria. And as we mentioned before, we were looking at special economic development, micro enterprises, and social services, as well as capacity to build for building assistance. So those are the areas that we focus when we look at the in the economic development, but the key component is making sure that we are focusing on job creation and job retention. Next slide. Demolition, again, we conditions of blight. We're looking at the physical decay of the spot basis. We're looking at demolition of dilapidated properties. And then under urgent need, the primary focus there is to make sure that the existing conditions are of recent or within 18 months of the application request. Next slide. So now we're going to get into the application evaluation criteria. Details regarding the application evaluation criteria can be found on page 12 of the 2022 CDBG application guide. So make sure that you review it because you will have more details in terms of how to get these points. Your application will be evaluated on a 100-point scale, and the score, the maximum score you can get is 100 points. The first category, which is project need and justification, is our highest scoring point, which is 35 points. And the reason we scored so high is because we want to make sure that the needs are put before anything else. We look at different structures as it relates to the nonprofit agencies. And then for our infrastructure projects, we go out to each site and we look at the conditions of the road and make a determination as to whether or not the roads are in fair, poor, or extremely poor condition. Under capacity and skill to execute the project, we scored that at 25 points. And we give that a high score mainly because we want to make sure that if you are awarded, you will be able to carry out the project in the timeline that is specified in the agreement. And that timeline is normally 12 months unless an extension is approved. We look at previous history in terms of applicants who have received CDBG awards and have open projects on the books and have not been successful with closing them out. If you are not, if you have projects that are open and you've been awarded, you most likely will have a lower score in that area because execute is not on the top level. The next is leverage of other funds. CDBG does not require that you have a match. However, if you have a match, we will look at the match to see how much you are willing to put into the project, and your score will be the maximum of 10 points. Under number 4, we're looking at clarity and reasonableness of the proposed costs. In this section, we ask that you, if you have an engineer that can certify the project, we look at that favorably. And the reason we look at it favorably, because we've had experiences where if a subrecipient or an applicant put in a cost, and then once we award the project, the cost is much higher than the actual project. And in some cases, if there isn't any available funding to assist, we cannot carry out the projects and we would have to cancel it out and reissue the funding. And then we look at broader context of the project. The broader context is looking at other surrounding programs that the subrecipient or the applicant may have tapped into, such as CMAP, GoTo 2050, any other assistance that the applicant may have gotten to expand the project on another level. And that is scored at 20 points. And those are the points that you can gain. However, on the other 3 sections, you will lose points. You will lose points if the project within that 12-month period, and you can lose up to minus 15 points. You will also lose points if you have not completed a fair housing and racial equity section. And again, you can lose up to 10 points in that category. And then last but not least, the financial capacity. We ask that you provide an audit. And if you have not provided an audit, you can lose up to 10 points for not providing the audit. If you have an audit and it's outdated, if it's maybe 2 years old, we will consider it, but you may lose a few points depending on how detailed it is. Next slide. So pretty much we've gone over a majority of the information in the application in terms of requirements, meeting a national objective, and what type of projects are eligible. So as you go into preparing your application, there are still a few other things that we want you to keep in mind. And those things are the CDBG application must be completed with an online submission this year. We will not accept any emails or any paper copies. Also, the municipalities may apply for one CDBG. However, the nonprofits may apply for one CDBG project, capital improvement project, and one CDBG public service project. Otherwise, there is a limit for one funding application per agency. The project must be consistent with the current Cook County Consolidated Plan, which is the moving to implementation, as well as the road policy road mapping, and it must include a focus on racial equity. Municipalities must complete a fair housing survey. This will not be requested by the nonprofit agencies, but it is mandatory that the municipalities complete the fair housing survey. You may have done it in previous years, and if you've completed in previous years, you just may need to provide proof that you've done it and the date that it was done. This year, we also have a major focus on the Section 3 new rule. We are currently working with different agencies, NASAD, to get a handle on what the new rule consists of, and we're hoping to have a workshop to provide the details regarding that later in the year. You also must have a focus on the MBE and WBE performance. And We will specify detailed information about the procurement process once the application is awarded, if your application is awarded. And we also look at the geography focus, which is within the South suburban areas, and the 22 application cycle and emphasis on the connection to the South Suburban Economic Growth Initiative. And there's a link there that you can go to and get more information about that. Last, we have the emphasis on the regional collaboration, which is consistent, as I mentioned earlier, to the On to 2050 Comprehensive Regional Plan and the project implementation within the context of the broader municipal or organizational strategic plan or vision. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, we're getting closer to where your applications will be reviewed. As mentioned, we started or launched, the program year starts on October 1st, 2022, and it will end September 30th of 2023. We launched the applications on January 12th, 2020, and today is the webinar. One important thing to remember is the deadline for submitting your application, and that deadline is March 16th, 2022 at 5:00 p.m. Any applications that come in after that timeline or after that date will most likely not be considered for an award. The application review period will begin immediately following the receipt of your applications, and in some cases we start reviewing them. If they come in early, we'll start reviewing them beforehand. But the actual period will start in March and it will end May of 2022. After the applications are reviewed and recommendations are set in place, those recommendations go through to our EDAC for a public hearing and approval. And that timeline is scheduled for June of 2022. After the recommendations are approved, we send them to Cook County Board for the final review and approval, and that will be in July. After they are approved by the board, the awards will be issued to the subrecipients in August, and the actual awards that will be awarded will also period starting July 30th through August 15th. Next slide. So now that we have all of the information with regards to what is required to submit an application, we can quickly go through a few of the items that I want to point out during the application review. Please be sure to start your application and make sure you have a completed application. So once you complete the application, you want to not leave out any sections incomplete. You want to make sure you complete the submissions page and followed by all requested information. So if the application, don't leave any blanks on your application, because we won't know if it was left inadvertently or if you had information to provide. So if it's nothing that you want to implement in those sections, just put in A. Also, keep in mind that the application guide for the application as well as for the demolition application is provided online. We want you to make sure that you include all resolutions and certifications. Make sure that they're signed and dated. As mentioned earlier, a match is not required, but if you have a match, please make sure you complete the certification for the match and insert that in as an attachment. Also, make sure all attachments, all required documents are attached, including the information as it pertains to the location of your project, if you have a project location, because our environmental specialists will need to have that information, exact addresses or exact boundaries. You also need to include maps and photos Those are very helpful during the review of your application. So make sure if you have maps, exact locations, as well as submitting for. Again, do not leave any sections blank. If you are submitting an application for a demolition project, please complete the entire application along with the demolition sections found on the last 2 pages of the application. And last but not least, please be sure to submit the entire application with all required attachments by March 16th, 2022. And next slide. Things to remember, which is pretty much a recap of what was mentioned earlier. You have to submit your application through utilizing the online submission page. No paper or email copies will be accepted. Municipalities can submit one application for either a demolition or economic development project. Nonprofits can submit one application for capital and one application for public service and planning. Again, you must meet a national objective and you must select an activity that is eligible. And the area benefit threshold must be a minimum of 51% for all capital projects. In addition, you must make sure that this application is consistent with the Planning for Progress and the Cook County Consolidated Plan moving to implementation. Municipalities, please be sure to do your fair housing survey if you haven't already done so. Double check your census tract and block group information and low mod income percentages. Again, there is a map or a key that is provided by HUD. The most recent one we have is 2011 through 2015, and I doubt if they're going to change it before this application period ends, but there is a link that you could also go to make sure that you have the accurate information for providing that, the census tract and block group information to us. Again, there's a checklist, an application checklist. So to ensure that you have your application completed, make sure you review that checklist before you submit your application to make sure that you have everything that's being required. Make sure that you meet that deadline. Have that application in by March 16, 2022 at 5 p.m. Make sure your board approves all of the required documentation and submit that with your application. Next slide. So we do have a list of contact people. The capital team members are listed here. So if you have any questions about anything pertaining to your application, or if you have any questions pertaining to the capital projects, please feel free to reach out to any of us that are listed there. And then also, I just want to give Erica Branch a few minutes to briefly go over the public service projects. Our public service application is not online as of yet. So if you are attending this workshop or this webinar in hopes of submitting a public service application, do not submit this application for a public service project. Erica will give you a little bit more detail in terms of what the public service timelines are. Erica.
Thanks, Sylvia. Once again, I'm Erica Branch, and I handle public service planning and economic development micro enterprise projects. There's a distinction. But as Sylvia said, those of you that are here looking for a public service application, that application has not been released for 2022 yet. That application will either come online soon or we will contact current agencies directly, and we will let you know what the process will be very, very soon, as well as where we are with the 2021, the previous year projects. So once again, if you are here for the public service application, if you fill out the capital improvement application for public service, it will not be reviewed for public service.
Nor for capital.
Nor for capital. So this application is only for capital improvement, demolition, and some economic development projects. I just wanted to make that clear. And information about the 2022 public service planning and economic development / macro enterprise projects. That application will be available really soon, or you will get an email directly from myself along with our Deputy Director, Cheryl Cook, about that process. Thank you, Sylvia.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Erica. So next slide, please. If you have any questions at this time, please feel free. I see some are coming in the chat. One question is regarding the Fair Housing Survey, if it's just for municipalities or if it's for nonprofit applicants. Again, the Fair Housing is only for municipal only. It's not for nonprofit agencies. And then the other question is, how do we gain access to the links on the slide? This slide presentation will be available after we sign off. Hopefully, I'm hoping that it will be. If not, give us at least till Friday to get this recording up, and then we'll make sure all of the links are also included. To clarify the eligible areas, if a nonprofit is based in one of the jurisdictions that receive CDBG funds, but the capital projects we're proposing will serve people from a range of jurisdictions, will we be eligible? Submit your application, we'll review it and determine which service areas you're providing your service for. If it's within the eligible jurisdiction, it most likely will qualify. Any other questions?
There are a few other questions. If you scroll up, Sylvia.
Okay. Going up.
Yes. Up.
Okay. At the end, could you go back to the eligible slide? Eligible project slide. You want to go back to, okay. One more. Go, there you go. And you can take yourself off of mute if you want to elaborate on your question. Hello? Okay, I'm not for certain if they're just looking at it or not, so. Okay, the other question is, how can we obtain new low-mod maps since the most recent census? The most recent one is the 2011 through 2015 ACS, and that's the one that's being provided to us by HUD. It's also in the application, so you can access that map through the application, and it's on. If you don't have it or you can't find it, you can reach out to me and I'll walk you through how to get to it. Yes, emergency. Well, Erica can elaborate on this. They're asking if the emergency shelter counts as a public facility, but most likely it's not emergency shelter. I had to rethink the question. It can count as a public facility, and that's determined whether or not you're meeting the beneficiary requirement. And that is if it's servicing individuals of a limited clientele, such as seniors, youth, developmentally disabled individuals. And then we can look at homeless shelters and things like that to make sure that that's a qualifier. And then the next question is, would an HVAC system for a public facility be acceptable? Yes. We will accept HVAC systems installation as well as roofing repairs or roofing installations for those qualifying public facility agencies.
Excuse me, Sylvia, can I go back to the question about the emergency shelter?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. I just want to make sure that I'm really clear. This is Letitia Fiorito with Wings. Hi, Erica.
Hi.
So yes, I'm talking about our safe house in the suburbs that is not an entitlement area. And so, yes, it does. No. Okay. It serves the population of the LMI in a lot of different ways, but obviously it's victims of domestic violence. So I'm just wanting to clarify for a capital project if that would count.
Yes, it would. Yes.
But let me be specific about this. There are certain lines that are intermingled here. If the shelter site is not in an eligible area, for instance, say if your shelter site is in Evanston, you will have to prove that over 70% of those persons that's living in that shelter are not from Evanston, meaning they are from non-entitlement areas of Cook County.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, so the shelter itself is not, and I apologize for taking anyone else's time. The shelter itself is not in an entitlement
Okay.
area. It's in Rolling Meadows, but I have to prove that the clients are more than 70% of the, okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Erica. So did I get all of the questions in the chat? Okay.
Sylvia,
Mm-hmm.
will this presentation be available
Yes.
online?
Yes. It will be available online, and I'm hoping that it will be there probably by the end of this week. If not, you can reach out to me and I'll let you know when it'll be available.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Mm-hmm. No problem. Now, there's a question here that said this funding will prioritize the South suburbs, but won't exclusively fund the South suburbs. Can you elaborate on that question, Emily?
Hi. Yes, sorry. I saw something about there was something on one of the slides about the focus is on the south suburbs for this planning cycle, this funding cycle.
Well, the focus has always been on the South suburbs, but it's not limited to.
That's what I was wondering. Okay.
Yeah, we service all areas. Maywood, River Grove, Stone Park, Bellwood. Yes, we service all of the areas. The entitlement jurisdictions that have their own, which is over 200,000 population. I listed those out, and that's the city of Chicago, Evanston, Skokie, Arlington Heights. So, and that information is also provided in the guide. Okay.
Oh, sorry, my internet went out. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But so you serve, so it's, yeah, I understand. Thank you so much.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So that concludes our presentation for today. If you, again, have any other questions that you may think about as you go through and review your application, the list of individuals that are on the contact list, you can contact any of us and we'll be more than happy to assist you with your question. And as you go forward with completing the application, again, don't forget the deadline, March 16th, 2022, 5 p.m. And good luck on your application. We hope that you have a successful application and enjoy the rest of your day.